Bismillah, alhamdulillah, assalamu alaikum, peace and love. This is Brother Ali. Welcome back to the Travelers Podcast. I'm recording here tonight, late at night in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is my former home. Usually when I'm recording these, it is the middle of the night, either because if I'm at my current home in Istanbul, Turkey, in my studio there, I'm usually talking to people who are in America. So in Istanbul time, it's 2 a.m, so that it can be a decent time for them. And then if I'm not in Istanbul, I'm usually on the road touring, performing. And so all of these episodes that you hear are usually recorded for me in the middle of the night. And as an artist, that's one of the times that we come alive, but it's also a certain vibe. And as I say every week, I'm really grateful for you to be here. We just wrapped up, we just concluded the Travelers Tour, 7 weeks, mostly on the West Coast. There were a few Midwest shows and, Southwest, but mostly on the West part of the U.S. And it was an amazing experience. It was also really grueling. And as is usually the case, I don't realize how tired I am, how beat up I am, and how emotional I am until I get to the end, because of the fact that we've got a mission that we have to accomplish, and we have to be there for the people that are coming to support us, the people that we serve, the people that make it possible for us to live our dreams and do what we love to do, and feed our families doing it. It's just so much that you got to go. It was a lot before the pandemic, just especially as an independent artist, because there are so many variables already. Business is different for us all the time. Things just go up and down. It's just kind of the nature of, being in the business we're in, especially being independent. And now with COVID, and we're still not out of the pandemic. It definitely seems like we're hopefully at the tail end of it, but we still came across a lot of variables that were just completely unpredictable. So in certain states, when we started the tour especially, they still had mask and vaccine mandates. And in some of those states, a lot of the people would not go to an event where they felt like they were being told what to do vis-a-vis masks and vaccines. And so a lot of the people that would have come didn't come. And they hit me up to let me know that. Like, hey, man, I hate to miss you. I've seen you. Some people have seen us 20 times. There literally are people that have seen us 25, upwards of 20 times. And they're like, man, I never miss your shows. I can't do it, man. I can't do the vaccine. I can't do the thing. Getting a test is, and that's everybody's decision for what they want to do with that stuff. And so there were people that didn't come for that. Then, for example, we were in Seattle in a room that I've sold out, a similar size room over and over and over again. And so in Seattle, it was light because that was the first day that they lifted the vaccine mandate and the mask mandate. So there were people in Seattle, some of the places we go to, Oregon and the Southwest, those are more, tend to be more conservative places, whereas Seattle obviously is very, very liberal. And so that usually has a lot to do with how people felt about vaccines and masks and the pandemic in general. And so in Seattle, there were people, probably a third of the tickets we sold, the people didn't come. They bought tickets and then just did not show up. So it was just really deep, man, dealing with that every day and not knowing how is this going to affect different people in different ways. But then also, expenses are extremely high, as everybody living in America knows. We try to keep our ticket prices really affordable, and the prices for all of the things that we use and do just went up. So it was really a lot. It was really a trip. One of the things that I noticed is that it really feels like the people that used to come to the Brother Ali show because it was something to do, maybe because it, reminds them of when they were in college or some period in their life when underground hip hop music played a major role in their life. People that, are just kind of general concert goers. I felt like we didn't have as many of those people. It felt like it was really just the people that are really locked in and tuned in and engaged with what we do. And so that part was dope, you know what I mean? Because, the percentage of people that purchased the VIP package would be huge sometimes. Sometimes it would be 20% of the people in this crowd bought the VIP package. which is really dope. And the people that I'm talking to, like you all are listening to the podcast, you know all of our newer music, you know all the classes that we've done, people that bought the Brother Minister limited vinyl, for example. So that was really dope. One of the other things I did notice, though, is that it was an observation of mine. It felt like people like forgot, or their relationship or their connection with being present in a room with other people is just different. Like it felt like the participation at shows was different. It wasn't less, but it used to be that people would go to shows and it was nothing for me to try to get a crowd to interact, because the way that I was raised, especially on the mic in hip hop, is like the way that you interact with the crowd and you get them to participate, the crowd interaction, you get them to participate in a way that is overwhelming, because you want to give the crowd a collective experience, not an individual one. You want people, it's like you can have an individual experience listening to my records. And I'm grateful to God and my producers that like we make records that at their best, they are an experience for the people that connect with them on an individual level, in your headphones, in your car, on your Bluetooth speaker, doing your dishes, you know what I'm saying? Or whatever it is you're doing, on your workout, your walk, But what we wanted to show is to have a collective experience. We want people to hear their voices together. We want people to move their bodies together. We want people to really feel that I'm not alone in this room, and I'm not alone in this world, and I'm not alone with the feelings that brought me to this music. That's a very powerful thing that's just ingrained in me, that's what, as an MC, the master of ceremony, that's the gift that you give the people, is that I'm here to give you my energy and my thoughts and my art and my creative thing, but I'm also here to channel yours so that I can feel it, but so that you can feel it. And I just noticed that I observed, it was my experience, that there were a lot more people that were in a room and it seemed as though they were unaware that other people were experiencing them. Like people that would just be dead stare. And those very people would, message me after the show, or they would say after the show, that was so amazing. But while the show was happening, it's like their awareness of the fact that they were impacting other people, that like other people can see you and other people are either sharing energy with you or they're not, So that was really, really deep and really interesting. I'm very grateful that on this tour, so many of my really dear friends came to visit me for no other reason than they just wanted to hang out and support me. Some of my dearest friends, Ant from Atmosphere came to a few of the shows. And that's one of my dearest friends, if not my dearest one. It really meant a lot to me. Slug from Atmosphere came to the Madison show. That was the last show that we just did last night. And coming up on this podcast, stay tuned, because we recorded 2 episodes with Slug that are amazing. We did one in front of an audience, the VIPs. So it's in a room full of about 50-something people in Madison at this beautiful theater. And we recorded audio and video. And I talked to him for about an hour and a half in front of the audience. They asked him questions. And then this morning in the hotel room, we chopped it up for about another hour and a half. And I mean, I always say that I'm going to become a really great interview. Watch, y'all are going to be here. I'm going to become a great interview, inshallah. Interviewer. That's my intention. And I don't know if I'm that yet, but one of the things I do know is that I think because of the relationship that I have with the people that are on this show, I think that they are a different version of themselves than they've shown in the past in public. And so I'm really grateful because Slug is one of the really important people in this culture, and to me, and to hip-hop music in general, and to underground hip-hop particularly. And I feel like he really just gave us beautiful stuff. So stay tuned for that. There'll be 2 episodes like that, inshallah. Today on the Travelers Podcast, this is still the month of Ramadan. Thank you so much. I got beautiful responses for last week's episode. The last 2 weeks, we did Ask Me Anything, where I turned the camera off, just turned on the mic. I was by myself, and I answered your questions and reflected on things that you asked me to reflect on. The second of the 2 wasn't necessarily answering questions, but I got a lot of questions about Islam. And so I just turned the camera on and talked, for almost 2 hours, just about what it means to me, for people that are interested in looking into that tradition, some ways to maybe approach that. And it was a really emotional one for me. I'm hella emotional. It's Ramadan. It's the end of a tour. I'm away from my family and I haven't been. Nobody needs an excuse to be emotional, but I am an emotional person anyway. And I am that right now for sure. Our episode this week is a really big one. Imam Zaid Shakir is one of the names that people in America should have known for the last 20 years. We just had the 20-year anniversary of 9/11 not long ago. And it's the case that, as my friend Azhar Usman said, I'm sorry, my friends came to visit me. Amir Suleiman, the greatest poet alive in this moment. Everybody knows how much I love Amir Suleiman, one of my dearest friends. We lived together for a while in the Bay. He came to visit me at the Denver show. He flew into town literally for no reason but just to hang out. I saw my friend Mo Amer. You know what I'm saying? Mo Amer is a super dope comedian. He has 2 specials on Netflix, and he's got an amazing show coming on Netflix that he let me watch. A lot of this series. It's amazing, man. Super dope. I don't know what I'm allowed to talk about and what I'm not. But I saw my friend Azhar Usman. I saw Rami Neshashibi and the people from Iman in Chicago. I saw Mansoor Panawala that we talk about on this podcast all the time. Our sister Amna Mirza was going to come to the show in the Bay from Zakat Foundation, but she was under the weather and it was really important to me to not get sick, so she was being respectful. But yeah, really amazing people that we saw throughout this journey. My friend Sheikh Jamal Diwan came and hung out, and the twins Iman and Khadija Al Tawam that move on stage with us. Some people call it dancing, they call it movement. They came as well, and their beloved mother came out. Just really amazing people that we saw along the way. If I'm forgetting anybody, please forgive me. This week on the show, Imam Zaid Shakir is one of the leaders in America, and maybe the leader in America, that Americans should know, because he, in the American Muslim community, is universally loved, universally accepted. Imam Zaid was the spiritual advisor and the imam to Muhammad Ali in the last phase of his life. Muhammad Ali joined the Nation of Islam with Elijah Muhammad. We talked about him last week on a podcast because he's so important to America and to me and to the world and to Islam and to sports and to, any talk about freedom and justice and equality and revolution. Muhammad Ali is one of those people. He joined the Nation of Islam and became a Muslim with Malcolm X and with Elijah Muhammad. And he was in that movement until 1975 when Elijah Muhammad passed away. Probably, I would argue, the most important Muslim leader, especially Orthodox, like Sunni Muslim leader in America, was Elijah Muhammad's son, Imam Warithuddin Muhammad. Sometimes they call him Wallace Muhammad. Wallace Muhammad was the son of Elijah Muhammad, who became the leader of the Nation of Islam in 1975 when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad passed away. And he made a tremendous transition and shift from the theology of the Nation of Islam, which is in contrast to and differs in many ways from traditional Sunni Orthodox Islam. And he made a big transition, and the overwhelming majority of that community followed him into that. And then he led that community from 1975 until he passed in 2008. That was my teacher. That was my leader. That's the community that I came into. Wallace Muhammad, Warithuddin Muhammad, W-Din Muhammad. His son-in-law is the one that helped me convert to Islam, was my first direct teacher. Imam Matthew Ramadan, he's somebody that's come up on this podcast several times. And so Muhammad Ali followed W-Din Muhammad. Minister Farrakhan left Imam W-Din Muhammad to rebuild the original Nation of Islam. And that kind of became the two streams after Elijah Muhammad passed away. There are others, but those are the two main streams in that community, in Black American Islam. And there are others, of course, but those two streams, those two branches off of the tree of the Nation of Islam, were in contrast to one another for a long time. And then in the mid-2000s, Minister Farrakhan and Imam Warthi Muhammad reunited the two communities. And for people in my generation, that made us so happy because of the fact that our parents' generation had a split that we never experienced. You know, that we just knew our people in the Nation of Islam, we know there's theological differences, but we love them. And we've always just felt like family with them. So, you know, people like Minister Abel Muhammad, Minister Nuri Muhammad, Imam Sultan Rahman Muhammad, Minister Wesley Muhammad, and even Minister Farrakhan himself, and J Electronica, and like these people in the Nation of Islam, like we just love them. You know what I'm saying? I had a sister in the Nation of Islam the other day, was my Uber driver. And I got in the car and she was like, Ali, Brother Ali? And I was like, yes, ma'am. And man, we just had such an amazing conversation, and she was driving me to my hotel and she dropped me off and we just sat there and prayed for each other and, got a little emotional like we do, beautiful thing. So then Elijah, Wallace Muhammad passed away in 2008. I was there at his funeral. I put dirt on his casket. And Minister Farrakhan was there, right in the front. And at that point, Muhammad Ali selected Imam Zaid Shakir to be his imam. And that's not a claim that Imam Zaid made, but it is very clear that Muhammad Ali chose Imam Zaid to head his funeral. And they ended up having two funerals in Louisville, Kentucky. The Islamic funeral that was attended by Dr. Sherman Jackson and Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, and Minister Farrakhan was there, and the president of Turkey was there, and Cat Stevens was there. A lot of us were there. I wasn't able to attend. I actually was with Dave Chappelle the night before in Minneapolis. But, that was a major event. And then the next day, there was the celebrity kind of funeral with Malcolm X's daughter and with Will Smith and Billy Crystal and all these, amazing celebrities that came out to pay tribute. So Imam Zaid Shakir is the one that was the spiritual advisor to Muhammad Ali and conducted his funeral. And he also founded the first American accredited Islamic college, Zaytuna College in the Bay. He's the co-founder in the Bay Area. So for as much as we talk about Islam in America, people know very little about it. And Imam Zaid Shakir, when they always say, well, who should we know? I always say, you guys are talking about Islam. You never have people on TV to talk about Islam that our community actually recognizes. We never see our community leaders on TV. You're talking about us, but you don't talk to us. And this is the way that the American propaganda machine works. They talk about us. Sometimes they'll choose people that we don't even recognize. You know what I mean? They might be activists. They might be spokespeople. Some of them might be good. But these are not our leaders. And they say, well, who should we know then? Imam Zaid Shakir is, I think, one of the first names that you should know. And there are other names as well. And I mentioned some of them last week. Imam Zaid personally is a big part of the reason why my family lives in Turkey. In 2014, my wife and I are both converts to Islam. We both really wanted to spend the summer of 2014, really rededicating ourselves to our religion. And so Zaytuna College, Imam Zaid's college, and then also this other organization that Imam Zaid works with, they do what they call these intensive summer programs. And so the beginning of the summer, I spent the first half of the summer in the Bay Area at Zaytuna College doing an Arabic intensive, where all you do is you get up every day, you eat and sleep and dream about and eat and everything is Arabic. They overwhelm you with more than you can possibly do, and then you try your best to do it all and you can't. But wherever you get to, that's the amount of Arabic that you could take in during this period of time. And then the second half of the summer, I came home to watch the kids, and my wife went to Turkey with Imam Zaid and with Sheikh Hamza Yusuf and Dr. Abdul Hakim Murad and certain other people to do what they call a Deen Intensive, which is where they do a similar type of program in an Islamic environment in a Muslim country, where they give you the roadmap of the entire tradition. And so my wife went to that program, and again, they overwhelm you with more than you can take in, but you come away from it with a much greater understanding for how this religion is organized and how to access the knowledge and the guidance of the tradition. So she came back from that experience and said, we're going to live in Istanbul someday. And I was like, all right, don't. But I thought that it would be probably, after we're retired or our kids got older or something like that. And then we just kept having kids. You know what I'm saying? Me and my wife are not family planners. And, so there usually is some form of a kid on the way. We had some younger ones since then. But during the pandemic, we decided this might be the time to do this, So we moved to Istanbul, Turkey, and we have Imam Zaid to thank for that. So we're very, very grateful, especially during the month of Ramadan. We actually filmed and recorded this conversation before I left for the tour. So I was in my studio in Istanbul and just had a really amazing conversation with Imam Zaid. So you get to be a fly on the wall, as it were, for a conversation with one of America's true living legends in the world of Islam, and just an incredible human being. He shares so much from his life. We're sponsored, as always, by the Zakat Foundation, by UPF, by Vice Gerant Makers and Merchants of Fine Men's Tailored Clothing, and by Resma Menikim and his new book that's out now called The Quaking of America. Enjoy this episode. Peace. One of the things that I always come across, most of the people that I perform for and most of the people that listen to my music and support me are not Muslim. And I'm always asked all the time, why is it that people don't seem to know much about Islam? And like Azhar Usman says, since 2011 and even before that, we've had a public discussion where we're talking about Islam, but nobody's actually talking about Islam. Nobody's talking about the theological tradition, the intellectual tradition, the spiritual tradition, Islam as a guidance for life, Islam as a healing force, what Islam has done not only in America but around the world, globally, everywhere that it's reached, from West Africa to Spain, to Turkey and all over the world. And one of the things I find is that people don't even know who our leaders are, or who the people are that they could ask, to speak for us and to speak about us and to share some insight. And so people always ask me, like, who should we talk to and who should we look at? And your name is always the first one that I mention, because it's really clear to me that you're the most universally loved, respected, accepted. I mean, across the different corners of the Muslim community, you're somebody that really leads us, and sometimes people will sometimes make the distinction between Sheikh so-and-so and Imam so-and-so, and it's almost as if Imam sometimes is a notch below a Sheikh, and all these terms are relative, they're all used in different contexts, but, when we talk about Imam Zaid, we're really speaking about the fact that you have helped to guide us and to lead us and to synthesize all of the different streams in this community and really be a genuine leader for us. So I'm really happy to be able to, for those that don't know you, that may watch and listen to this podcast, for just for people to witness you and be exposed to the beauty that is Imam Zaid.
Pray that Allah makes us worthy, and Allah gives us strength and gives us humility, and through humility is elevation. And we can't elevate ourselves. So if Allah elevates us, we pray that we're able to give everything its full right. The Prophet mentions, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a man who charged into a battle, and he said, paradise is for the servant, tubu li abdin, who seizes the reins of his steed and goes forth into the fray, the thick of the battle. And he says, if he's in the front, إذا كان في الساقة كان في الساقة. If he's in the front, where valor is displayed and heroes are identified and reputations are earned, then he gives it its full right. وإن كان في الحراسة. And if he's in the rear guard, mopping up, cleaning up the battlefield, dragging the dead off to be buried, he gives it its full right. كان في الحراسة كان في الحراسة. So we just pray that wherever Allah places us, we can give it its full right. And thank Allah for using us for His religion.
I wonder if I would like to start with your beloved mother, if it's all right. You helped to re-release the amazing book that she wrote called Dear Self, that she wrote up. It was about the year 1973, but she wrote it. It was a collection of her compiled notes to herself, almost like journals and things like that.
Right.
That came out later. So am I right to understand, if I'm remembering correctly, that she was born the daughter of sharecroppers in Georgia?
That's right. Yeah. Lurleen Spence and Richmond Whitaker in Harris County, Georgia. And they were sharecroppers. I actually, in my youth, the whole family would go down to pick the cotton. So I've picked cotton. We had the long sacks and you stuff in the sacks. And the owner of the property got most of the cotton. And the renter just got enough to maintain, but not enough to get off the land. So it was sort of a form of semi-slavery. But for us as children, it was just a gathering place. So we picked the cotton all day and then feast all night. And, folks down there knew how to cook. So, but yeah, and they were both descendants of slaves. On my, I think, Will Spence on my mother's side was a slave, and Rich Eubanks on my grandmother's side, on my grandfather's side, was a slave. So they were one generation removed from slavery. So it wasn't that long ago.
And you met them and you saw them and talked to them?
Oh yeah, we lived on the farm. My mother, when my mother and father broke up, they got together briefly and then it was all over. But after the first breakup, she was in Michigan, and so she took us all back to Georgia. And before any public housing opened up, we lived on the farm for a little while. And I have distinct memories of that time. I must have been probably about 4 or 5 years old. I remember the thunderstorms coming and the walls of rain kicking up dust, and you're racing the wall of rain back to the house. I remember the outhouse and the Sears Roebuck catalog was the toilet paper. So you had the outhouse. So it was out of the house, the toilet. And the toilet paper was because those big fat Sears Roebuck catalogs, that was the toilet. You ripped off a sheet and kept it moving. So, I remember the feast. I remember my grandmother running and chasing down chickens and wringing their necks. So you grab the chicken and whirl it around until the body separates from the neck, and the chicken's running around till it realized what happened. Like the chicken realized he didn't have a head, and then he stopped running. He said, all right, I guess I'm done. So yeah, it was a good time. You remember relatives and just family, the blessing of family. I think one of the things we're losing in the fast pace of our modern society is to really appreciate the blessing of family. Family is very powerful. And to have people you're connected with who care about you, who you can share your life with, who are on this journey we are all on collectively, but from a particular perspective. I think, and that's something Islam emphasizes, right? You have the blessing of neighborliness, and then the double blessing if your neighbor is Muslim, and the triple blessing if your neighbor is a Muslim and a relative. And so family accentuates a lot of things. Family is the icing on the social cake. So we'll still have society with families degenerating, but we won't have any icing on that cake. So the sweetness will tend to go out of life.
It's one of the things that I think that's so beautiful about being connected to a living tradition of any kind, whether it's something more modern like a musical tradition or something pre-modern like the Islamic tradition, But just it really helps to offset and counteract this idea of the idea that the ones that come later are always better than the ones that came before them. What's new is always, what's latest is always greatest. That, you know, when we're connected to our grandparents, we know our grandfathers, our grandmothers. We know that, like, those were people, we're not like them. We're not as strong as they are. We're not as wise as they are. There's a...
Absolutely. Even just bearing pain, like we always say that a lot of times our parents, grandparents, uncles, they'd be sick. You wouldn't even know because they didn't complain. They didn't moan and groan. They just dealt with it. It's like I think earlier generations, they labored under no illusion that life is can be very painful, and that's both in a physical and in a non-physical sense. And so you just have to deal with it. I think that's one thing we're finding in this coronavirus situation. It's not going anywhere, and you can't. It's obvious now. I'm not trying to discourage people from getting vaccinated, but it's pretty obvious we're not going to be able to vaccinate ourselves out of the problem. You know, a place like Israel, there for people, elderly people, they're on their fourth shot, and they're admitting that it's not stopping this Omicron. So, you know, we're probably going to move from the alpha to the omega, and we don't know what it's gonna contain, but we know this is probably gonna be with us, like the common cold and the flu. So at a certain point, we just have to suck it up and deal with it. And I think that's something that we saw in our elders, just their fortitude, their manliness, their womanliness, if you will. And just to quickly circle back to the idea of family and tradition, I think one of the things that tradition, for example, traditional religion gives us, it gives us a family. So we're in the family of Shafi, Malik, Imam Ahmed, Abu Hanifa. We're in the family of their students, Zufar, Muhammad Hassan al-Shaybani, Abu Yusuf. These are our forefathers. These are our grandfathers. And we have our grandmothers also. And one thing about family is when the elders talk, you shut up. You don't talk. I had last night just one of the youngsters in our family. I had to like tell him. He wore these gaudy. I don't think he wore. He pulled them out. These gaudy, fake gold diamond rings at track practice, and I'm like, I said, listen, we don't do this. I said, number one, I said, listen, you're talented, athletic, you're a good student. I said, you don't need these trinkets for anyone to appreciate you. They appreciate you for who you are. And he had to shut up and listen. And a lot of people don't get that. And he subsequently apologized, and he took them off. And so when our elders and our madhahib, when they speak, we listen. We don't say, no, well, you didn't have this hadith at your disposal. And so that's why you didn't know. They had more at their disposal than we had. And they were a lot closer to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they were a lot closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they were awliya, as Imam Ahmed mentioned. لم يكن الفقهاء أولياء لله فليس لله ولي. If the jurists, the foundational jurists, are not the beloved friends of Allah, then no one is beloved to Allah. So these people were beloved to Allah. They were close to Allah. When they speak, we shut up. And I think that's one of the things we lose when we lose family. We lose that ability to subordinate ourselves to the elders. And you know, like the elders talk, when we used to go with our parents to visit, you sat and you didn't say anything. And if you interjected in the conversation, they speak when you're spoken to. And they were imparting very valuable life lessons to us that, you know, successful life is about discipline. Like they'll see someone like you, an artist. They see Brother Ali on the stage or in the podcast, but they don't see the hours experimenting, trying to get these lyrics right, They don't see the hours that are sent trying to just catch and ride the wave of this particular beat with the right words. They don't see those hours
Yes, sir.
and the discipline that requires. That is, and so they see the part on the stage. They might even, for some performers, see a lack of discipline. It's like this cat jumping all over the stage, but they don't see the part that requires discipline, that requires self-control, that requires restraint, that requires reflection and contemplation.
Yes,
You
sir.
contemplate over a word for an hour. It's like, nah, does this word really work? And they don't see that patience that informs that contemplation. And so I think it is very important for us to learn those lessons, because otherwise we just think everything is the surface, and we're deceived by the surface. We see the performer, but we see the great jazz musician. We don't see my brother's a jazz guitarist. And
Mm.
when we were sleeping, 3 in the morning, he's up practicing his chords.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
We sleep.
Yeah.
He's up. And so people see him in the club. I wasn't Muslim at the time, folks, so I could talk about the club. So we see him in the club and we just see the performance. And we say, man, I want to do that. And okay, you really want to do that? I tell you what it involves. My brother he's up 3 in the morning all night practicing his chords.
Absolutely.
So he can master this instrument.
Jimi Hendrix got kicked out of a movie theater for playing the guitar because he brought the guitar to the movie and was trying to practice his guitar in the theater. And they said, "Sir, you got to either stop practicing or you got to leave." And he said, "Well, I'll just leave."
Yeah. And so they see Jimi Hendrix, the innovator. But what does that innovation, what was the price in terms of hours and hours and hours of practice? Like the Malcolm Gladwell, right? The tipping point, the 10,000 hours.
Yes, sir.
The theory's been debated, but it takes a long time to get good at something. The public, to use Gladwell's thinking, the public doesn't see the 10,000 hours. They just see the finished product and think, oh, anybody could do that. But in reality, anybody who puts in those 10,000 hours, like you said, Jimi Hendrix, they say, oh, Jimi Hendrix naturally gifted, or is just plain lucky. There was one of the golf greats, I forget, Ben Hogan, one of those guys. Someone said, man, that shot took a lot of luck. Luck must be a big part of your game. He said it is. He said, the harder I practice, the luckier I get.
Allah, Allah, Allah. Amazing. So your mother, Allah bless her, she ended up leaving Georgia and going to Philly and so that she could go to school?
Connecticut. Oh yeah. She first, before she got married. That's right. Because we had family that had moved up to Philadelphia. So she went to Philadelphia and graduated high school in Philadelphia. That's right. And then the summer after she graduated, she went to Michigan to visit her sister, Gertrude, who we call her Aunt Gert, who lived over in Battle Creek, Michigan. And that's where she met my father. He's from Michigan. And so.
And that's where the Mitchell name comes from, your father's side?
Father's side, yeah.
Okay.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Alhamdulillah. So your mother wasn't able to pursue the education that she really wanted. But
no, she never got anything but an A throughout school, right? But she before she knew it, she had 6 kids, and
MashaAllah,
that was that, as they say. Then we had a 7th a little later on.
But she kept writing. And she wrote about political issues, and she was well known for her writing even before the book came out later. And
that's right.
She got hate mail from the KKK and death threats and Nazis.
The Nazis, the Klan. Yeah,
that's in the 70s.
She would show us that. That's in the 70s. These folks have history, man. So, And she would show that to us, like say, this is what's out there. This is what's in the world, and so get ready for it. And that, again, to go back to like having family and having elders who lived and could just tell it to you straight and aren't trying to make everything just a Hakuna Matata feel good experience. Like we all know the story of like the first time you went to the store to buy something and the neighborhood bully took your money and you came home with no milk, eggs, and bread and no money. And your parents told you, like, you get out of this house. I don't want to hear that. You come back with my eggs, my bread, and my milk, or with my money. and, and it's reality, and that's what I think is Johnny Cash, A Boy Named Sue.
Yes, sir. Written by
And
Leonard
so
Bernstein.
Okay, there you go. And so, why'd he do it? Said when they finally met up, he wants to kill him, man. I had so much hardship. He said, I knew I wasn't going to be around and you're going to have to learn how to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And so they're going to start picking on you early. You're going to have to, you'll learn how to handle yourself. And then he let him up and they had a drink and that's the end of the song.
MashaAllah.
They drank juice. They drank juice. All the Muslims out there, they drank a juice. They were at a juice bar.
So the brother Brendan, who's the producer of this podcast and my partner in our business ventures, he was my DJ for 10 years, and we used to do a hip hop cover of Boy Named Sue.
Oh, SubhanAllah.
On stage,
yeah. Give us a few bars, man.
Oh man, that was probably that's almost 20 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, SubhanAllah. SubhanAllah.
MashaAllah. So you're talking about the bullies and going to the store. Now you're talking about hard-hitting New Britain, Pinnacle Projects.
Yeah, Pinnacle Heights.
Pinnacle Heights.
Yeah, they tore it down. But I was just recently talking to a friend of mine who came out of there, and we were just mentioning like, this it was rough, but you're growing up in the environment. For you, it's normal. But an outsider might say, those conditions are rough. You got, some tough people going to prison, even back there before the prison industrial complex really kicked in. And you got, this and that, and the drugs and the this and the broken homes, female-headed homes, the whole gamut of issues. But we were discussing how many very successful people came out of there. Like a friend of ours, a little older than myself, Larry Conway. Oh, and the friend I was actually talking with, I posted something on Facebook, and when my father passed, and he saw that, and he actually wrote something in the comment, and then I was able to track him down, and we had a long talk, and he was just saying how Larry Conway was going to beat him up in his front yard. Larry was rough, man. He's heading for trouble. And James, this is a young man that he's not young now, but that Larry was going to beat up. James' mother came out and started talking to Larry and like, why are you going to do this? And, you're heading for trouble. And she gave it to him, and he stopped fighting. He let him go. And he turned his life around. And when I was in New Haven, he was a principal of one of the elementary schools there, the Bassett School. And now I think James told me he's the superintendent of the school system. Another friend, James Yap, he got his PhD in nuclear medicine. He's working in Japan right now. Another one was a scientist at NIH. He died young. He died a couple decades ago. But we were on the football team together. Someone had sent me a picture of the football team. And all of us, you got these big afros, and so this is 1973. But some very, very successful people came out of those projects, and then some people have some difficulties. I know most of them are dead now, died young. There was one friend was living a couple decades homeless, living in the streets. My brother, who still lives in New Britain, he saw him. He was at pumping gas at a gas station. He said this particular friend came out of the bushes and asked him for $1 and went back into the bushes. He said, "Al, you got $1?" But I heard recently said that he cleaned himself up. This is a talented young man, talented athlete, a good student. But he cleaned himself up. He said he saw him. I'm going to try to get in touch with him. And he's working. He's out of the streets. So, you have success stories, immediate success stories. You have long-term success stories, and then you have those, unfortunate. One friend, when I moved back to Connecticut after traveling all around the world. This is in the early, no, the after I got out of the military. Our next door neighbor, I was at, so we moved back in 1994 from Syria. No. I'm sorry, from Egypt. We spent a year in Egypt after I graduated college. And so it was 1987, winter of 87, 88. And we went to this program in New York, and someone's tapping me on the shoulder. And I turned around. It's my next door neighbor's daughter, Sandy Johnson. She's a Muslim living in Boston.
Amazing.
So I'm a Muslim. And then once we got settled, I started going into the prison on a regular basis. And this guy 2 doors down, we were like enemies because he liked my sister. She didn't like him. So I had to keep him off my sister. So, and so I'm going into he's in the Jamaat, Melvin, and he's Muslim. And so, alhamdulillah, Allah, life is just this wonderful journey. And one who doesn't enjoy it just hasn't stepped back to get a perspective so they could appreciate it.
It's become a theme of this podcast. Zakat Foundation has been so supportive in the launching of this podcast because mostly of our sister Amna Mirza and her understanding that culture is an extremely important element to living life with meaning, and also an important element to raising the dignity and the living standard of human beings around the world, which is the job, the aim, the mission, the goal of Zakat Foundation. During the month of Ramadan, Muslims are getting hit up by everybody because this is a time where, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the most charitable human being that ever lived. But even during the month of Ramadan, he was more charitable than he was throughout the year. And so we try to emulate whatever level of that we can in our own lives. So Ramadan is a major time for giving. It's a major time to reassess the blessings that we've had. A lot of us think we don't have enough, but if we really look at what we actually have more than what we need. Most of us eat more than we need to eat. We have more clothes than we need. We have more things than we need. We have more stuff than we need. Most of us are wasteful. And so this is a time to really sit with that, because we're not eating during the day and we're sleeping very little, and we become, our senses become heightened, and our awareness of what we're consuming, and the fact that I do not need to consume as much as I do. I don't need to waste as much time, money, food, resources. I don't need to waste as much as I'm wasting. So it's a very beautiful time, And so during Ramadan is a really wonderful time to approach giving throughout the year. And Zakat Foundation has a lot of really dope programs. It's only $5 to provide a hot meal for people to break their fast during the month of Ramadan. If we aren't able to fast, if we break our fast and without a good reason, we have to feed people usually as a way to make up for that. And so that's one of the ways that Zakat Foundation provides for people. Another is you can sponsor an orphan. It's only $50 a month. And that might seem like a lot of money, but man, how many TV subscriptions do we need? You know what I'm saying? How many $5 cups of coffee do we need, really? You know what I'm saying? How many, all of this stuff we spend our money on. So, for $50 a month, a person who is in absolute crisis and catastrophe in their life, their entire situation is improved by that. And so I just highly recommend Zakat Foundation. They operate all over the world. They have people on the ground that ensure quality control for the programs that they have. It's a Muslim-led organization, but it's not only Muslims that donate to them, and they don't only help Muslims, and they don't proselytize. That's just not what we do when we're doing it right. Like it's our obligation, it's our responsibility, it's those people's right to be served, and it's an honor. It's a religious duty for us. And so that's all there is. Like, we don't do this like, hey, now you have to, accept this religion or repeat after me and say this thing and, go through this, whatever. So during this time of heightened giving, please consider giving with Zakat Foundation. Follow them on social media. Zakat US is the best way to keep in touch with them. And then also hit up their website. Check out all their beautiful programs. Very honored to be with Zakat Foundation. One of the names that comes up on this podcast all the time is Resmaa Menakem. Resmaa is a therapist who specializes in trauma. He worked with U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. And when he was in Afghanistan, one of the reasons that he specializes in trauma is because he was with them in a war zone. And he's scheduled to come on and talk to us on this program soon, inshallah. But, Resmaa started to notice very overt and recognizable trauma in himself. And these are his stories to tell, so I won't retell them. But, he's got stories about being back in Minneapolis and certain things triggering experiences that he had in Afghanistan serving troops. And so it really made him hyper aware. And then he started to learn about other traumas in himself and in the community and in others. And he dedicated his life and his work to working on trauma. And not only in individuals, he says, if trauma is not healed, doesn't have the opportunity to heal in a person, this trauma loop starts to look like their personality. And so we start feeling like this person is this type of person. But in a lot of cases, it's unhealed trauma. And he says in families, it looks like this is just what your family is like. In communities, it starts to look like culture, but it's actually not culture. It's group responses to trauma. And so he deals with racialized trauma. He has a New York Times best-selling book called My Grandmother's Hands that's really incredible. Resmaa just released his new book called The Quaking of America. It's not on Audible yet. They don't have it on audiobook yet. My eyes aren't good enough for me to just sit down and read a book like that. And so I'm hoping that the audio version comes soon. But head to Resmaa, RESMAA.com. Check out My Grandmother's Hands. Check out The Quaking of America. Check out all of these amazing offerings that he has. He has classes on what he calls somatic abolitionism. Just amazing workshops and talks that we can all benefit from tremendously. Resmaa talks about trauma, healing, and race from a perspective that I've not heard it spoken about in the public discourse. And he's starting to be recognized more and more, and I just can't recommend highly enough. So please follow him online, Resmaa, RESMAA Menakem, and head to resmaa.com, order The Quaking of America, and we look forward to having Resmaa on the program. This program is sponsored by really incredible partners, and I'm really honored and grateful to be with them. These are people that I know and trust and love, and that's why some people tell me that my ads are mega long. Like my podcaster buddies are just like, dude, your ads are way too long. It's fine, you care about this stuff. At the end of the day, it's an advertisement, fam. Cut it shorter. But there are other people that hit me up and they're like, yo, I learn a lot from what you're saying in the ads. So they're extensions of the podcast. They're really part of it. We are really grateful to be, in partnership with these super dope sponsors and people from our community. But along with that, if you go to brotherali.com in the join section, we have what we call what we call a caravan. And the purpose of that is to bring people together in a way that does keep us independent. It means that I have choices about who I want to allow into this platform. You know, I would really like to not have to have big corporations that I don't know, you know, as sponsors. You need sponsors on your podcast. It's a lot of work. There are a lot of expenses involved. You know, it takes a lot. So you got to keep the lights on. You got to make it sustainable. But the caravan is one of the ways that really always keeps us rooted in the fact that we're supported and this work is made possible by the people who appreciate it, the people who are part of it. You know, I don't have this big kind of gap in between, you know, the speaker and the audience, the artist and the audience. I don't have this feeling that like you have to stay away from me. You know, there are times where I have to protect myself and my energy and my health and things like that. But it's really important to me, and it's never leaves my mind, that the people that really make this possible are the people that engage the music and listen to the podcast and support what we do. So that's what the VIP packages are at the shows. You know, it keeps it so that the ticket's only $20. You know what I mean? And this podcast is free. Anybody can get the podcast for free, and we'll keep it that way. But the people that support in the caravan at these different levels, they're the people that are making it possible for that to be the case. And there are different levels at which you can join. But then not only do those people support, it's not just about giving me money, but it also increases the level of engagement that we have, not only between myself and the audience, but between the people in this caravan that have come together because of these things that we talk about, the intentions that we have, you know, the growth and the healing that we're looking to experience, the connections we're looking to make. So if you head to brotherali.com, in that caravan section, in that join section, there are different levels. The top tier is, you know, those are I think they're called the Trailblazers. But that top tier, we have a private Slack channel where people really share things that are going on in their lives. You know, there was a brother that we haven't heard from for a while. There was a guy that we hadn't heard from. And so I went on the channel and I was just like, hey, so-and-so, what's going on with you, man? And he was talking about going to visit his family. He's like, I'm sorry, I haven't checked in. He's like, man, you guys know I'm a nerd. He's like, I got caught up in this fantasy novel that I've been reading, and like, I just haven't been checking in. But he was talking about going to visit his family that always made him feel excluded. And the way that felt. And I was in Madison, Wisconsin at the time where I was born. And I'm like, man, thank you for saying this, because I felt that way with my family. If you listen to the first episode of this podcast, that's the way I felt with my family that lived in Madison. And so I'm like, man, you just helped me realize that I'm experiencing something that had just kind of been running in the background when I'm in this city, you know? And so him sharing that opened up an opportunity for me to share that. And I'm like, man, I should make a song about this. You know what I mean? So shout out to my friend Ted in the Travelers group, in the caravan on Slack, you know, because him sharing that really gave me permission to sit with something that I wasn't acknowledging was going on inside me. This is what I mean when I say we're reflections of each other. We need each other. We give each other permission. We give each other a different way to view things. So head to brotherali.com, go to the section called Join, and see what's up with this caravan. You know, it's one of the things, Sidi, that I've noticed about you specifically. Like, you're known for every room that you walk in, you just bring a ray of hope and a big smile and beautiful energy. And you and I have been in situations because we've done some community living together. MashaAllah, it's a great honor for me to be in the community of you. And, you know, we've talked about some very difficult things behind closed doors, and then walk out and there's a room full of people waiting to see Imam Zaid. And we're talking about people's lives really being harmed and these really heavy stuff, and you walk out of the room and I'm still carrying it, you know, and I look over at you and you say, Assalamu alaikum, and, you know, I mean, what kind of magic act is that? I mean, what kind of,
you know what? a friend of mine used to say, uh, like the opposite, like we're out there and breathing fire, back in the day, kufar, and then they say, then after we're at someone's house eating dinner, they're rolling on the floor, making jokes with the kids, wrestling the children. Say, "Man, that's the same guy who was out there yelling at us."
Subhanallah.
But alhamdulillah, the people have a right over us.
Mhm.
And the Prophet ﷺ, he had great sobriety. And sometimes it's huzn, but they translate as sadness, but I think sobriety is better. But it was in his heart, not on his face. His face was smiling. And he said, amongst his sayings, don't be mean. The smallest amount of charity you might give, even if it's meeting your brother with a pleasant face. And so we don't know, like you're saying, we're talking about some really weighty stuff and some terrible situations, but we're talking about them. When we go out and meet people, many times those people are living them. And the last thing they need is someone that's more depressed than they are. Especially they came to this program to get inspired. And so and you find people like that, people when we were in Syria, and I can understand it because we were there we started in the mid-90s, so the situation in Algeria is still going on, but you find these brothers from Algeria uh scowling, and like you're like, man, should I give him the greeting? If I don't say it right, he might beat me up or something. You like, and just it's we have to transcend. Like we're in this world, but we're not of it, and our hearts can't be mired in the muck of the world. And if our hearts become burdened down, weighted down, and mired in the muck of the world, then we will never have the opportunity to attach our hearts to Allah in a meaningful way. And the path is all about our hearts being attached to Allah. Zuhud is the renunciation of the world. Now we're in the world and we acknowledge that and we fulfill the obligations that the world has over us. But it's about attaching our hearts to Allah, to Almighty God. And Almighty God is unchanging reality. كان الله ولا شيء معه وهو الآن على ما عليه كان. There was Allah and there was nothing existing along with him, and he is now as he was then. And so Allah is unchanging. And if our hearts are attached to Allah, we very easily maintain an even keel. And we're not tossed and turned and battered by the vicissitudes of the world. But if our hearts are attached to the world, we're up and down, we're battered. 1 minute we're happy, 1 minute we're sad. And because that's the nature of the world. They say, one of the Arab poets said, يعني منع البقاء تقلب الشمس. Like the movement of the sun defies the reality of permanence in the world. Because the sun's always moving. It's moving in the winter is way south if you're in the northern hemisphere. And the summer is way north. Every day it's moving a little. Its color is changing based on the atmospheric conditions. So its color is changing. Its size is changing. When it rises, big. When it's at the height of the zenith, it's small. Then it starts getting big again as it sets. So the sun is constantly changing. And the changing nature of the sun defies the illusion of permanence in this world. So the world is always changing. And if our hearts are attached to it, our hearts are going to always be changing. And that's why we want to attach our hearts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we can rise above the world.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah. And almost every time that we're let down, whether it's by movements that we're part of or community projects that we're attempting to be a part of or leaders and things like that, is people being distracted by their lower desires and by their desire for something temporal for something small, and we're united by this desire to be connected to the source of and the meaning, the world of meaning, and to make things beautiful, and then somebody gets distracted.
Which means just simply that they themselves had never transcended the world. Because if you've transcended the world isn't going to distract you. But if you haven't, then you're amenable to those distractions. And so that's why it's really important to, when we talk about political struggle and change, that we change ourselves first. When I was in New Haven, there was a gentleman, will remain unnamed, wasn't a Muslim, but he was really working hard in the community, and but he was known to beat his girlfriend, and who was a petite individual. Some let's keep moving. But she's a petite individual.
No.
she's a petite individual, and so we made a flyer. We said, like, you can't have a revolution without true revolutionaries. You can't change society in meaningful ways unless you change yourself. This individual also had a cocaine problem. And so we're saying, like, you're trying to change society, but you haven't even changed yourself. And so you're behaving violently with your girlfriend. You have a cocaine problem. And so if you can't transcend these things, how do you expect the people to do it? You have to model the behavior that you're calling people to. Otherwise, they see right through you and they don't take you seriously. And if you're not taken seriously, you're not going to change anybody. So, oh man, this dude talking about this and that, man, he beating up on so and so, and the dude can't keep cocaine out of his nose. Like, who's going to take this guy seriously? And so we have to really start at the bottom. And that's the beauty of Islamic transformation. It doesn't start at the top. And there's a role for change at the top, don't get me wrong. But that's not the comparative advantage of the Muslims. So we use Adam Smith's terminology in economic terms, finding your comparative advantage, which was a veneer to justify colonization. It's like Ghana, they have a nice climate. It's nice for growing cocoa. So they should grow cocoa and send it all to Europe, and we'll make the chocolate and add the value and make the money.
Right. In Belgium.
So, yeah, exactly. So if we use that terminology, as Muslims, our comparative advantage isn't orchestrating change at the top. That might be some other organization. So when people talk about, reforming the police, and okay, you could change the structures, the rules. Minneapolis, you talk about Minneapolis, they were one of the most reformed police departments in the country, and you on paper, but you still got someone like Chauvin in there, and we saw what happened. And so there's a role for that. But if we don't change the hearts and minds of people at the grassroots level, you just have this racist individual going into the reform structures. And you'll still have incidents of racially inspired violence and other causes, not all racial. I think we should be mature and open about that. But there's certainly a lot of racists going into the military. Now the military is starting to have an anti-racism program to weed out the racist in the military. So you can rest assured this is happening in police departments across the country and other government aid, prisons and prison staffs. And so, but the point is, if there's no one who sees it as their primary mission to change people, the change at the top is only going to take us so far. if not become counterproductive. And so Muslims definitely have a role to play in working for changing the structures and institutions in society. But at the end of the day, there are no racist structures. We hear that talk. We got to change these racist structures. Institutions are only collectivities of human beings. So if the structures are racist, that just means there's a bunch of racist human beings in there. And if no one's working to change those human beings, then the structure is only going to take you so far. And I think our comparative advantage as Muslims is changing those human beings. And this isn't just me. This is Malcolm X, right? His
Yes,
letter
sir.
from Mecca. It was carefully and crafted. People, Malcolm was a very shrewd uh, analyst of society and people. And he knew exactly what he was saying when he said, perhaps if America could examine Islam, it would help America transcend the race problem. If you don't want to take it from Malcolm, we can take it from Arnold Toynbee and his essay on Islam in the West. It's Islam can offer the West two things: a solution to the race problem and a solution to the problem of alcohol,
Amazing.
and by extension, other intoxicants. And so that's arguably the greatest historian of the 20th century. He definitely knows societies and people and nations and civilizations. His magnus opus is a study of civilizations. So Arnold Toynbee is saying the same thing Malcolm is saying. So when you have two great minds from two very different vantage points saying the same thing, it behooves us to listen. And I think this is where I think a lot of Muslims really miss the mark, because you have a lot of Muslims, especially now, who are advocating for the structural change, the institutional change, and really parroting the words and programs of others. And I'm not condemning those programs in any way, shape, or form. I'm
Yes,
just
sir.
saying, what is our comparative advantage as Muslims, historically and contemporarily?
You know, it's one of the reasons that you specifically were so transformative for me, because of the fact that I know that you are even more aware than I of the need for the structural changes and the need for those things, and but also the transform that Islam synthesizes all of those things, and it also gives the ability for a human being to have a deep, profound change on a spiritual level, on a cognitive level, on even the level of identity, to connect. And I know that when you were young, you were identified as an atheist for a while. I know that you had
That's right.
connections to the Black Panthers. There was a time when you were really turned on by the idea of Marxist socialist ideology, transcendental meditation. And what I've heard you say about that time is that each one of those things seemed to be a piece of the puzzle, but you were looking for some sort of, as a lot of us were, most of us that are inspired to actually become Muslim, it's because of the idea that we have this concept of the world and the transformative power of looking at the world outside, but then also internally, and that the beauty of Islam in bringing all of these things together in a way that has really obviously been arranged by the source of all things, by the Most High,
Absolutely.
by the Creator who created us in this organized way, by the one who originated creation in this organized way, in this beautiful orchestrated way, and then also this particular way and this approach to life.
Yeah, no, that's beautifully articulated. That's one of the things that really got me into Islam. One, there were other things, but just having studied uh, Marxism, socialism, and seeing what started as basically like Marx stood Hegel on his head. And so Hegel's spiritual dialectic became Marx's economic material dialectic. And so and so it's a very economic determinism, very uh, rigid program. And when the human part is missing, and we get what generally and broadly can be termed as Western European Marxism. We had the Frankfurt School and Marcuse, Adorno, and Gramsci, and Horkheimer, and later on Jean-Paul Sartre, and that what's called humanistic Marxism. It just didn't naturally fit, and you could tell like this. What Marx and Engels are talking about, this has its own intellectual strain and pedigree. And what these Western Europeans are talking about, the Germans and the Italians and the French, this has its own pedigree. Now, the roots are the same, but the branches are so disparate, or the gears, they're all in the same machine, but the gears just aren't meshing. And the beauty of Islam, when I started studying Islam, all the gears meshed, like the social, the economic, the political, the spiritual, all of them meshed together. That alone told me this is not from a human being. Mm. This is a revelation from a source of wisdom and power and authority that's beyond this world. Because human beings have tried to do this, and it just didn't quite work out. And so now to have this system that's so perfectly integrated, it has to be from God. And so that's one thing that really attracted me to Islam.
And you've had a long life of academic study, both in the West and then also in Syria and Morocco and other places. But when you became Muslim, you were in the Air Force, right?
Yeah, I was in the Air Force. That's right.
And I heard you say once that you thought that you had to leave because, all of our great hero, Muhammad Ali, said that he wouldn't go into the military and serve. And so you were thinking at one point.
So, I went in and, in 1976, became a Muslim in 1977. So we're only 5 years removed from the Supreme Court's vindication of Muhammad Ali's stand. So I tried to get out. So I'm a Muslim now. I can't be in the military, and so I tried to apply as a conscience objector. But the chaplain was arguing, well, there's no war going on. How can you object to war when there's no war?
So you're just objecting to jumping jacks.
No, I love the jumping jack part.
I know.
I remember my first semester in college. I flunked everything except weightlifting. I had no study habits. I just.
That's American. That was at American University or Rutgers?
No. That was at Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, right there, the hometown school.
I see.
Yeah. So, I was there, and the football coach wanted me to play football. So I'm lifting weights, trying to bulk up, and because I played in high school at the local school. And so that was one of the places before I got hurt in high school. Mm. But anyway, I had no study habits. I'm thinking this is like high school. Like, I don't study. I just, the day before the test, just read up on everything and go and pass the test.
The last minute
midterms came, man. I'm like, whoa, I got to read 150 pages in this book and 200 in this book. I said, this is a different ball game.
SubhanAllah.
But that's to say the jumping jack part wasn't it.
Right,
the physical exercise was fine. But so they said, you can't get out. And I don't know if that argument was sound or they just didn't want to lose somebody. So I said, well, send me to a Muslim country. So they sent me to Turkey before I changed my mind. Because even though Turkey is a very secular, it's still 99.9% Muslim. And so you went to Turkey, you couldn't run around with the girls. There weren't any nightclubs to go to speak of. And so it was, no one wanted to go there. Everyone wanted to go to Japan and Thailand and the Philippines. No one, they said, man, send this guy to Turkey before he changes his mind. Mm. And so I ended up in Turkey, and alhamdulillah, it was a wonderful experience. I had really, as you, I'm sure you and your family are finding, Really nice people, beautiful. We traveled all around to the historical sites and masjids and cities, to Konya and Kayseri, the eastern Turkey. We went to Urfa, where the story of Ibrahim and Nimrud occurred. And they still, I think it's called the Charshi Baluk, the black fish. They say the logs when the fire was stoked to burn Ibrahim, that the water created this pond and pool that still is there. And the logs turned into these black fish, and the black fish are still there, generation after generation. And so, a beautiful part out there, the olive groves and just the pastel colors of the landscape. It's a beautiful, beautiful land. And we went to Hajj from there. We just jumped on the bus
On the bus.
with the Turks. Yeah, yeah, you could do it like that back then. We just jumped on the bus and went to first to Medina, because I met someone in Turkey during the summer vacation from Uganda. And he said, well, if you're ever in the neighborhood, come visit. So we visited the Islamic University. There we got to meet Imam Anwar Muhaymin's family. Imam Anwar just finished memorizing Quran. I think he was 15, 16 years old. And his family was living in very difficult circumstances, but fi sabilillah, to get their children and themselves educated Islamically. They had to fetch water to their house. They didn't have running water. They have to go get buckets of water. And, these are the kind of sacrifices that were made. Again, someone to look at Imam Anwar Muhaymin and the Kuba Institute in Philly and, Imam Anwar, but they don't see lugging buckets of water upstairs. They don't see those years living in very difficult circumstances in order to get to becoming Imam Anwar and his brother Anas. So may Allah bless them. And so we got to visit them way back then. I got the beat down from the brothers at the university, because at that point, like yourself, I came into Islam, and my wife through the community of Imam Warfuddin Muhammad. And so, brothers were real nice, the American brothers that were there. And but once they got warmed up, it's like, Imam Warfuddin, he said he's the Masih al-Mahdi. He said this and he said that and yada, yada, yada. And I got beat down. I'm like, whoa, whoa, like, ease up. So
when I came in, when I came in that community in '93, that wasn't the language anymore. That phase, he had phased all of that out.
Yeah, that phase had gone. You move beyond the cockatrice and all of this stuff. MashaAllah. Allah's Rahim and Kareem.
And everything in between.
Everything in between. That's it. Alhamdulillah.
So when did you realize that you had this leadership quality, that when you speak, people listen to you, that when you give advice, people listen to it? At what point in your life
did
you...
I don't know if it was that grandiose, but I think when we came back to New Haven after the year in Egypt, so I graduated, got my master's, and at that point I just said, I need to go learn Arabic, study I did 2 years of Arabic at American University in Washington. Arabic was my foreign language. So they didn't teach Arabic at American, they taught it at Georgetown. And you could go to any of there were 6 schools, they had a consortium. Any class that anyone taught, as long as your school didn't teach it, you could go take it somewhere else, and it would be directly credited to your transcript. And so American didn't have Arabic, but Georgetown did. So for my foreign language requirement, which was a 2-year requirement, I studied Arabic. But that's just getting your feet wet. And so when I graduated, I said, I spent like technically 6 years, like 4 for undergrad and 2 for the master's. But the undergrad was kind of piecemeal. I did 2 years in the military, primarily through Louisiana Tech University, and the University of Maryland. they had agreements with the military for college classes. And then I did 2 years at American University in Washington, and then a master's in Rutgers in New Jersey. So when I finished the master's, said I've done 4 years of university. I need to do at least a year studying my dean. Actually, the plan was to go to Medina University. So myself, Abu Muslima in New Jersey, at the masjid in East Orange. We both he lived in our house when we were at Rutgers. Like we were renting the second floor of this 2-family house, and by stealth we moved into the attic and rented out the second floor to Muslim brothers. You know, and you got to do what you got to do.
Mashallah, you got to flip. Sometimes you got to flip it.
Yeah, so we covered up the windows in the attic, so no light when we turned the lights on at night. No light could get out, and people know someone's in the attic. And
Amazing.
anyway, so myself, Abu Muslima, who was a new convert, we applied to Medina. And so what happened? They're so disorganized back then. I think it's much better now. We're waiting. So I graduated, worked that summer, still waiting. So when September came, I said, I'll just go to Egypt. And so I just went to Egypt to study Arabic and a little bit of Islam. And then 2 weeks after I left, maybe 3, no more than 3 weeks, then the acceptance letter came. So I actually got accepted into the Islamic University in Medina. And Abu Muslim, I waited. So he went there. And then I was in Egypt. And so I said, I'll just stay here until I'm already here. And so he went to Medina and finished the program over there. And
but they've made you an imam wherever you went. I heard that you, forgive me, but I heard that you went for a short period to visit your mother-in-law in Hawaii, and they made you the imam at the mosque there.
Yeah, that was a little later on. I knew a little more, but yeah, that's right. I was imam there for 6 months. Well, alhamdulillah, it was good. I got to live in a little cottage in Manoa Valley, rainbows every afternoon, what they call the mocha showers, a tropical environment, mango trees on a big mango tree on the property. So a papaya tree, fresh fruit, tropical fruit. So alhamdulillah, that was a blessing. And New Haven at that time, so when I came back from Egypt, and ended up in New Haven, it was just, whoever knew the Arabic alphabet would become the imam. It was like we didn't have the advantages dear brothers and sisters have now. So, I'd spent the year in Egypt, and I'd done the Arabic at Georgetown. So I was a little more advanced than most of the other brothers and sisters. So I became the imam, and alhamdulillah, we had a good program going.
And this is
Allah,
like
made a lot of impact on the community.
Yes, sir.
This is
late 90s, late 80s, early 90s.
Late 80s, early 90s. Yes, sir. And then I started teaching political science at Southern Connecticut. I started my PhD at UConn, but that only lasted a year. We were so busy and wrapped up in the community, it was antithetical to PhD study. And so after 1 year, I kind of jettisoned that. And alhamdulillah, we accomplished whatever Allah deemed that we could accomplish during that time from 87, 88 until 94. But it's during that time that I realized that, okay, I'm getting older now. And I was still working full time. It's like many inner city kind of storefront masjids. The imam is spelled E-M-A-M, like the everything ma'am.
Oh,
like
man.
You the janitor, you
the accountant, the
muezzin, teacher, the marriage counselor,
the security guard, the social
security
worker,
guard,
the taxi driver,
the imam. Yes, sir. The everything. And so I'm working at Yale University Medical Bookstore, and I'm doing Juma khutbahs on my lunch break on Friday, and yeah, alhamdulillah.
That was a
And
glorious time, late 80s, early
it,
90s, black,
yes,
urban
sir.
Islam, because we would have the khutbah, we would have our religious services, but I mean, it was very common at that time to be that we were very active in schools, that we were
Oh yeah,
approaching, the brothers selling
absolutely.
drugs and offering them either the opportunity to train in carpentry or the opportunity for us to
Yeah,
run them out, or
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
We had what we call the Dawa Mobile, man. We had a van, and we got one of these PA systems, a Radio Shack powered by a cigarette lighter, and we roll through the community with the
yeah.
speakers, telling people come this now. We pull up right in the thick where they're slinging the drugs at, and stop and put our prayer rugs out and do salat.
Yes, sir.
Have one brother guarding us. It was pretty. We call those the heady days of the revolution.
MashaAllah.
And but it was a great, and it was pre-gentrification. It's before a lot of the gentrification that started earlier, but had really not reached its peak. So the communities were still intact before everyone kind of scattered, and those really strong African American urban centers got broken up and diluted. And so it was a great time. And I think a lot of nostalgia. It was so powerful. I think a lot of people got, hooked on the nostalgia of the times and
Mm.
couldn't really adjust
Yes, sir.
when times started changing. And I think that really uh, broke that kind of opportunity for really strong. And it's happening now, but just a smooth transition, transgenerational transition of sort of mass conversion.
Hmm.
And I say it's happening now because a lot of the young people who left, so I would say like during the 90s, started drifting away from
Yeah.
these communities, poor urban uh, communities and masjids. A lot are coming back now,
Yes.
saying when they were upper teenagers, and the lure of the dunya was strong, and that's when the more negative aspects of hip hop really started kicking in, and a lot of them want to be little wannabe gangsters because they're growing up in this very pious environment, and I think we weren't prepared for that. I certainly wasn't, because I came back from Syria, man. Everyone's listening to 50 Cent, and I'm like, I'm like, man, this guy cussing and cursing and swearing and talking about doing all kinds of illicit sexual acts and slapping women upside the head. I'm like, Muslim kids are listening. I was in shock. I'm giving cook bars against this, and people thinking I'm crazy. But it was a shock, and I think we weren't prepared for that.
We've been talking about vicegerent makers and merchants of fine men's tailored clothing on this podcast, and it's one of the things that I'm really grateful to share with you, because Usman the tailor is a really amazing human being who's reviving really a lost art. It's very strange, that the clothes we wear on our bodies and the food that we put in our bodies and the things that we, even the music that we put in our minds and hearts, that we're completely disconnected from the supply chain of these things. And so the same way, it's like, I would love to know the person that grew the vegetables I eat. Or if I'm a person that eats meat, I would love to know the person who raised this animal. And we hope to have Imam Dawood Yassin on the program, who is a really incredible human being. He's an imam, and his family only eats food that he either hunted or fished for, or someone that he knows procured it. but they're very intentional about the food that they eat, and that's extremely important because it's like all of the intention and all the process that went into that is going to affect what we become, because we are what we eat, we are what we listen to, we are what we wear. We're not what we wear in the sense that, like, if I wear Versace, then I'm better than other people. That's not what this is about. But it's about the idea and the reality that if somebody made the clothes that I wear on my body every day and the way that I present myself to people, whether, today I'm wearing a t-shirt, I don't usually do that in public, you know what I'm saying? But it's the end of my tour and I'm feeling beat up. I haven't seen a barber in a minute. I just, you know what I'm saying? It's what it is today, man. But the clothes that we wear on our bodies really matter, and the way we present ourselves really matter, and they do have an impact. And so if we buy these things from sweatshops and from major department stores and from, people in places that have zero care or concern about the impact they're having, or the impact they're having not only on the environment, on the people that are making and producing the clothes, or the people that are wearing the clothes. There's so much that goes into that, and I get it. I do it sometimes as well. But reviving that beautiful art of having clothes that are made by somebody that made with intention, made with care and concern about the people that do the work and about where the materials come from and about the culture that, like, you can go to the store and buy something they call a dashiki, or you could go to the store and, buy, all these things that come from, like, there's a culture that produced that. And and you should know something about that when you wear it. And so I just can't recommend Vice Gerent highly enough. The experience that you have if you go to Chicago, you visit Usman, his studio is in an apartment building and it feels like a home. It's very dignified, it's very relaxing, it's very calming, but it's also very inspiring. Like, he's got a purple wall, where you go in and the colors even in the room really give you a deep sense of cool, but also rejuvenation and creativity to be able to think about, like, how do I want to live in the clothes that I wear? And then you talk to him about the pieces that you want, and you look and you touch and feel fabrics, and he shows you different things, and he talks to you about the beautiful things about the body that you live in, and how we can dress to accentuate those things and to celebrate those things, and to be grateful for them. So here I go talking and talking and talking. It's an investment, I'm not gonna lie to you, but hit up Vice Gerent, VICE, Gerent, GERENT, Vice Gerent Official online. You can head to their website. Instagram is the best way to stay in touch with them. But hit up Usman the Tailor. Go through Chicago. Check them out. I promise you won't regret it. Vice Gerent, makers and merchants of fine men's tailored clothing. Unity Productions Foundation is a group that we've been talking about on the podcast from the very beginning. It's a really incredible project where creatives come together and they make these really dope projects. They do super amazing documentaries, and they really are united around the power of stories. They have a program called Unfold Your Own Myth, which is intended to help young people, but it's good for anybody to really unlock and, as they say, unfold the power of our own stories. Our stories are incredibly important. It's important for us to know that about ourselves, because so many of us live lives where we feel like, well, I'm not famous, and so I'm not important, and I don't really matter. I'm insignificant. One of the things about the believers is that we know nobody is insignificant, because in our belief, you were willed into being exactly as you are by the creator of it all. So if you're not important, the sun isn't important. If you're not important, the ocean isn't important. You are the Grand Canyon. You think you're, Rumi says, the great poet Rumi, you think you're just a drop in the ocean, but you're also an ocean, and you're also the ocean in a drop. And so every person has a story that's completely amazing, because the author of it is completely amazing, from our perspective. And I think that even if a person doesn't have that same worldview or belief, I think that idea resonates with people who care about art, especially art like mine that is story driven. And so Unfold Your Own Myth basically helps young people unlock the ability and the power of telling their stories. And it's important for each of us to tell our own story, but it's also important for us to hear each other's stories. And so if you're a person that brings community together, if you work with young people, if you're a leader of any kind, if you, work in groups, I can't recommend enough. Head to UPF, like Unity Productions Foundation, upf.tv/unfold, and check out Unfold Your Own Myth. I wanted to ask about hip hop specifically. Because prior to that, so many of us that came to Islam at the time that I did, we were inspired by Rakim. I'll never forget, Rakim took me on tour when I started performing, me and the brother Brendan, who's a producer of the podcast. And I'll never forget the day at Iman in Chicago that you and Rakim met. He's the first person that I heard say the name Allah. Lafta Jalala was the first time I ever heard somebody say, all praise due to Allah, and that's a blessing. And he said something about the Holy Quran, and I wanted to know, what is that? You becoming a Muslim in 1977, when did you start becoming aware of this connection between hip hop and Islam, and that being the new iteration of this Black arts movement and the consciousness that was connected?
I think that the early 2000s, after getting beyond that initial shock, and then learning, because I'm in Syria and we're just studying, and we're around the shuyukh and the students of knowledge. So we're not only isolated and insulated from the cultural currents that are happening in the States, we're isolated from any non-Muslim currents over there. So we're twice removed from the scene, if you will. And then coming back into it, and just really the negative side has now come to the surface, because we missed all the late 80s. We're in the community, and I think the first time I remember any kind of rap is when we were in the Air Force, but we were hardcore, so we weren't listening to music at all.
Okay.
But I remember the Sugar Hill Gang. That's the first thing I remember about hip hop, is the Sugar Hill Gang.
That would have been 1979, so 2 years after converting.
Yeah, that's it. And I'm in the Air Force, I'm in Turkey. And so some of the other brothers over there, they got the Sugar Hill Gang and some of the other early hip hop artists. But I'm told, like I said, I'm over there. When I'm not doing my job, which was very focused, because I typed code for these mainframe computers. So you had to have these big, huge card decks. You had to type the code in and then put the cards in the feeder, and that ran the computer, told the computer what to do. So I'm just all day typing code into these cards. So that's all I'm doing. And you had the spreadsheet, and you had to read the spreadsheet. So, and then I'm zoned in. After that, I'm with the local Muslims. I get off work, man. I'm going downtown. We're going to the Thursday night dhikr with the Naqshbandi brothers. We didn't realize it. We didn't know what a Naqshbandi was. We just knew, hey, these brothers, man, they go down there, they chant, then they give you some soup. They chant, and two brothers read Quran. It's man, this is beautiful, man. So we totally wrapped up with the local Muslim community, Erbakan and the Milli Salamat Partisi, the National Salvation Party, and that was it. So whatever Sugar Hill Gang or whoever else, we just heard reference, and someone might play it when the rednecks let them take over the radio for an hour or so, but that was it. And then from there, we came back. So we were talking, that's early 80s. And so I'm still, now we're back, and we're like hardcore Orthodox Muslims, man. And we're not listening to music. Music is haram. So that whatever's happening in the early 80s, that passed us by. And then we go to Syria. And so now So we're in the mid 90s to the early 2000s, only coming back and then being exposed to the negative side that led to, man, we got to look at this a little deeper. And then discovering that you have people like Rakim or Dead Prez or KRS-One and all of these positive people.
Absolutely.
I wasn't familiar with Brother Ali at the time.
Well,
That was later.
I was familiar with you. I remember in '93 or '94 going to a predominantly immigrant masjid, and at that time the masajid were really segregated. There were black mosques and non-black, like immigrant mosques. We used to talk about
Right.
indigenous and you know, an immigrant masajid. And I went. A group of us went, a small group, and we saw you speak in Minneapolis. And it was the first time we had ever seen a black Muslim speak at one of these places. And they had so much reverence for you, and they were asking you questions that they had been debating because they really wanted to hear you weigh in on them. And so you were becoming a national figure. But then after that, you left to go study more. You know,
Right.
you were already accepted and respected and acknowledged. And then after that, went to Syria to study more. And I just, you
Right.
know, that's a somewhat unique thing for a person. It's really almost reminds me of what happened to Rumi or what happened to Imam Ghazali. You know, this feeling that like there's got to be more self development. And so I just
Right.
wonder if you could talk
Absolutely.
about that. You know, and you weren't a kid anymore when that happened.
No. I left. I was 38 years old when I left to go to Syria to study. But yeah, we just realized like I'm 38, and I'm working, and the weekend we're traveling all over the place, and we're going to all these demonstrations in D.C. and New York City at the UN. So we're renting buses. We would go to New York many times because you had the Bosnian crisis, then Somali situation, and all these demonstrations, we would bring more people from New Haven than people came from New York. Man,
Subhanallah.
we rolling in buses, man. We coming down. We had the whole Jamaat was mobilized, man. We're gonna change the world. And so my involvement was becoming so overwhelming. I said, well, it looks like I'm like in my mid 30s, and this is the direction my life is going. So if I'm going to do this, I need to really learn this thing a bit more thoroughly and more deeply. And because it appears this is going to be it. And
Hmm.
so that was really the motivation to go. And then when I got over there to Syria, I was supposed to be with an entirely different circle of people. There was a brother, Syrian brother, when I was teaching political science in my political science class from Damascus, Abdul Fattah, and his family was a very highly regarded religious family. And his father was one of the very notable mashayikh in Damascus, and he was the khatib. He was the Friday sermonizer at one of the very well-known masajid there.
Hmm.
And so he had arranged for me to go to Syria, and we were writing. He had a PO box and then the phone. But I lost his phone number, and so I ended up going there and just meeting some folks and falling in with a whole nother different group of people, which could have led to an entirely different outcome than what actually transpired. And so, alhamdulillah, it was an opportunity to really see people who were scholars, but they were spiritual masters. And so that was a new twist, because here, if you say tasawwuf, Sufism, it gets in the Muslim circles, it gets a very bad name.
Especially at
They
that
think
time.
of, especially at that time, it evoked images of hippies in New Mexico, smoking hash, reading Rumi, and trying to wrestle with
Twirling.
the yeah, and trying to wrestle with Ibn Arabi, and not praying, but hitting the pipe and wrestling with Ibn Arabi, and ruminating on Rumi. that kind of image was just totally contradictory to what we actually discovered there. And it was very refreshing. And so I began studying with one of those scholar of tafsir, but also a student of the great Sufi master Muhammad al-Hashimi, Sheikh Mustafa Turkmani, who was also a student of another great master in the Rifai tradition, Sheikh Abdul Samad Abdul Basit Sheikh Abdul Basit. I'm sorry, the Quran recitals. Abdul Samad Abdul Basit of Sheikh Abdul Basit. And alhamdulillah, I was able to study with him 5 years, like 4 times a week after Fajr, 4 or 5 times. And I lived in the neighborhood. Then when we moved away for just family purposes, I would ride my bike across time at Fajr. It took me half an hour to get there. And in Syria, the Iqamah for Fajr is half an hour after the Adhan. So as soon as they made the Iqamah of the Adhan, I'd jump on my bike at this big black Chinese-made bike. It was like a army tank. It was indestructible. The brake rods were metal rods, so you didn't have to worry about these cables breaking and all this. And I jump on my bike and ride across town and get there at Sheikh Mustafa's masjid just in time for the Iqamah of Fajr, and then pray Fajr. And then we had lessons in various Islamic sciences. It was a beautiful time and a beautiful experience. And to be with people who, unfortunately, there's a bad tendency here for Muslims to tear each other down. So much so that when we were filming the thing for CNN, the 25 Muslims, I talked about my experience with the young Puerto Rican girl, and how just transformational that was. The producer said that he never saw a community whose leaders tore each other down like the Muslims. Why you did D? Why didn't you pick this one, that one? They don't know what they're doing. And it's like, wow. And so to be there in the company of a Muslim who in 5 years, intimate in his house, in the masjid, in the classes in the neighborhood, between Maghrib and Isha, never once heard him speak an ill word about any other human being, to say nothing of any other Muslim. Never, not a single negative word about another human being. Even when prompted.
even when there's a good reason to say, there's a lot of negative things to say.
And so, alhamdulillah, to see prophetic character embodied in living human beings is a very powerful experience that leaves an indelible imprint on one's soul and on one's heart. And so we pray that we could just carry a little bit of that light and shine a little bit of it out into the world.
I never took the opportunity to visit Syria, but I've heard so many people just discuss what a illumined, beautiful place and society it is, and there are a lot of Syrians here in Turkey, and so I have a lot of beautiful interactions with them here.
Yeah, you have access to a lot of Syrian scholars there in Istanbul.
That's why I'm trying to catch up on this Arabic. I'm trying to really get the Arabic to the point where I can go and sit with them and listen to them and ask them questions and speak with them, inshallah.
Inshallah. May Allah reward your niyyah, your intention. May Allah reward your intention.
When did you connect with the champ? When did you and Muhammad Ali become close?
Yeah, so probably maybe 5 years or so before his passing, he had orchestrated everything, like the memorial service, everything. Ali, this is how it's gonna go. When I die, he wanted it to be a teaching moment, and where just people can learn about Islam. and so they wanted to bring in someone to like just kind of make sure everything was kosher. I guess we could say halal. And that, and so I was brought in, and then they also wanted just for the a front person who would be reflective of someone that uh, reflected the values of the champ, So I was identified as the person to do that by the grace of Allah Ta'ala. And so one of the first things we did was we spent a couple days in Muhammad Ali's house. And so, he's right there, even though communication was difficult, but he was still alert and very lucid in his thoughts. And so, yeah, that was, and then keeping in touch with the team after that. But those couple days where I really had an opportunity to interact, that's where I wrote my 2 poems for him. Right there, and I read them right there in the house. So, alhamdulillah. Then, I did something really stupid. So we went to dinner, and he still had his humor and the love for the people, because we went to some, high-end restaurant in Louisville, and they had a mural on the wall. It was kind of a plantation scene, and so Ali, he said, "Where are the black folks?" and then so and I hope Allah blesses me to find this packed down somewhere. He on a cloth napkin with a Sharpie, he drew me a picture, because Ali inherited that artistic ability from his father. So we all know his father was a sign painter and an artist, and he would paint scenes for churches and make signs. And so, and man, I misplaced that napkin. Not that I want to sell it on eBay, but I just want to frame it and display it. And may Allah bless me to find it.
I mean,
it's somewhere in one of these boxes I got that I haven't opened from many, many moves.
So that was 5 years before he passed. What was the...
Yeah, about 5 years before the passing. Yes, sir.
Alhamdulillah. And you were with him in his... I remember I texted you for something. Right. I was in Las Vegas, of all places. And I texted you, and you said, "I'm with the champ, and I think today might be the day." Yeah, and then my phone, I went on stage, and I didn't like being in Las Vegas. I was there because some of my mentors, a group called Atmosphere, asked me to come. And they've been such beautiful mentors to me that anything they ask me to do, I always say yes. But I didn't feel like being there, and my phone was about to die. And then my phone died, and I said, okay, I don't want to get this news here. And so I went on stage, and when I came off stage, everybody, all of the crew and everybody was standing there looking at me, because they knew that I accepted the name Ali because of him, and obviously we all love him so much. And they just all had this look on their face, and that was a difficult time. But what was it like for you to be there during that time?
It was a powerful experience, because mashallah, I just read Quran and dhikr the whole time, and just talked to him, encouraged him to, say this, say that, say this, say that. And alhamdulillah, it was a powerful experience. And all the family was there. So, yeah, mashallah, mashallah. Then I got pretty much assigned to the body. Like everywhere the body went, I had to go. And so it was just me, the drivers of the hearse from the hospital, to the funeral home. And so, mashallah, mashallah, mashallah.
May I ask, did you wash the champ?
We did, yes, sir. Myself and a local brother that had already been prepared in advance. Like the local, there were several cities where there was the Michigan, the farm, Louisville, Arizona, and so there was a team there, but alhamdulillah, I was part of that team by the grace of Allah.
And then you led both of the services, the Islamic Janazah and then also that public
Yeah, and
memorial.
you know the Islamic Janaza, it was all supposed to be one service
Huh.
uh, at the KFC Center there in Louisville, but circumstances led to them being separate. And I think we were really not prepared for the emotion of the crowd
Mhm.
uh, at the Janaza, because it would have the security, and like I said, I was with the body, and so other people were arranging things, receiving dignitaries. That's what led to kind of confusion with President Erdogan. I wasn't there. I came there, it was close to noon, and walked into this whole scene, and the messages were flying and mixed up. But alhamdulillah, but it is what it is. He's the people's champ, and the people were there to send him off. And I think that there'll probably never be a public janaza like that. Although last Sunday I attended the janaza for the 17 brothers and sisters, West African brothers and sisters, 11 from Gambia and the others from Mali and Guinea, who died in the fire
In the
in the
Bronx.
Bronx. I mean, there was folks like blocks around. There was folks from blocks around.
And then what was it? I
Mashallah.
saw a photo. I saw all kind of photos from the public memorial service. There's a really beautiful photo of you and Will Smith and some of the other folks that spoke. But what was it like to be in Louisville for that particular?
I think the when yeah, like a lot of all the boxing greats were there, and we had a little private thing where it was basically the family and most of the boxers, Will Smith and all them. And I don't know if any of that will ever get out. It was an interesting encounter. But I think Tyson, that was really, because Tyson's a Muslim, so,
Mhm.
and he's serious about it. I think people underestimate, as George Bush might say, people misunderestimate Tyson. But Tyson is, Tyson's making money. He had his one man play, and he has things going on. Mike is a very intelligent gentleman, and so I think that was a Muslim connection. And because me and Mike were like throwing dirt on the grave, like everyone else has got their suits on. I mean, Mike, we had our suits on. It was like, man, listen, Mike, let's do this. And
You know, we it's just a tremendous honor, to call you a mentor and a big brother. And you talk about people making history. Many of us are very aware, of the fact that that we have this tremendous blessing and honor to be in conversation with you and community for you. And I think that a lot of us, we really want to make you proud. And I wonder if you could give an idea of what would that mean? Like, what would it mean for us and for my children's generation to honor all of the sacrifice and all of the investment, all of the time and the heart and the energy and blood, sweat and tears and laughs and learning and traveling and just everything that you've invested into this community and into us. What would it mean for us to make you proud?
I've never been asked that question, but and now that you ask it, I would say if everyone that I know, from those who are younger than myself, can reach the grave saying La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, I would be proud, because there's a lot of things to prevent that nowadays. If and reach the grave just saying La ilaha illallah. Icing on the cake would be reaching the grave, saying La ilaha illallah, and valuing this tradition to the point that when we have to make really hard decisions and difficult decisions, that we err on the side of caution. And we just don't get caught up in things that just aren't our business. And I'll give an example. You know, the whole LGBTQ thing plus, it's not our business. So what adults do, you know, that's their business. I'm not here to question, condemn anybody for whatever decisions they make. But when Muslims just jump on this bandwagon, which they wouldn't have jumped on even 20 years ago, then it's just an indication a lot of what's happening is a product of the nature of our time. And our truth is a timeless truth. And a timeless truth that shouldn't be compromised for something that's temporal. And so again, what people choose to do, I'm not here to question that. Adults make adult decisions, especially in a free country. But I do question Muslims making it their business and their priority. This is not our business. Min husn Islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'nihi. From a person's Islam being good is leaving that which doesn't concern them. And so people's sexual identity, people's sexual practices, you know, that's not our business. That's their business. And that's just an example. And many other temporal shifting issues. So 20 years ago, people thought generally in our society at large a whole lot differently. President Obama came in as an anti-gay marriage president. You should never forget that. And he went out as a gay marriage president. So I'm not here to give any value judgment to the former or the latter, but just to say that's indicative of a shift in society. And we don't know. There's going to be a tremendous backlash. And it's going to start with these 2022 midterm elections. And so when that gains full force in 10 or 15 years from now, a Muslim sudden shift back to a more traditional religious position. And so what happens in society, controversial or non-controversial, that really involves positions that Muslims have historically been very clear on. If people can go to their grave holding on to those traditional positions, holding on, and again, not in antagonistic ways that alienate people, even though what I'm saying right now will alienate a lot of people, but that intentionally alienate people, not in those ways, but in recognizing we have an amana. This is, our religion is an amana, a sacred trust. إن الله يأمركم أن تؤدوا الأمانات إلى أهلها. Allah, Almighty God, has commanded you to deliver the trust to its rightful possessors. So our responsibility is to pass this religion on to those who can't come after us as we received it from those who preceded us. Anything other than that is not our business. And so as individuals, we could take that position, but as a religion, as a community of faith, we have inherited a sacred trust from our Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings of Almighty God upon him, all the way down. And our responsibility is to give that trust to those coming after us as we received it. And that's going to be our honor. As Umar radiallahu anh said, نحن قوم, we are a people. أعزنا الله بالإسلام. Allah has honored us and dignified us with Islam. فمهما ابتغينا عزة في غيره أذلنا الله. And whenever we seek honor, we seek strength, and anything other than that, Allah is going to debase us. And so if people can take that to their grave, I'll be proud. But that, like I said, that's icing on the cake. If people just go to their grave, practicing their religion, affirming its truth, saying, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, I'm proud. Because there's a whole lot to deter people from doing that. How many, yourself, myself, we're converts. How many converts have fallen by the wayside? Mm-hmm. You know, probably for every brother Ali, every Imam Zaid, and not la nuzaki Allah ahada. We're not praising anyone. But to just make a point, for every one of us, there's probably 10, 15 who fell by the wayside. And so, and this is not to condemn them as bad people. This is to say there's a whole lot out there that will push us and encourage us to fall by the wayside. Mm-hmm. And so someone who can resist those forces and go to their grave saying there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and in saying that recognize all of the prophets, Jesus, Moses, Abraham, that probably most of the people viewing or listening to us are familiar with. But we just add Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah, Almighty God be upon him. So there's a lot to deter a person. There's a lot to deter a lot of really Christian folks from being Christian folks in this day and time. And so for my Muslim brothers and sisters, those who can hold on and go to the grave with La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah firmly imprinted in their hearts and etched into the deepest recesses of their consciousness, and that belief is translated into healthy practice, I'm very proud.
Alhamdulillah. I appreciate you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I pray Allah give you a long life full of ease and every goodness. And
I mean, all of us.
All of us. And
all of us.
Give us the ability to stay close, inshallah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we, inshallah, maybe Allah bless us an opportunity to do it again. And we'd like to, if anyone listening, viewing this, anything we said that might be offensive, we apologize for that. But, you know, openness and honesty is always the best policy. Mm-hmm. And so we've tried to be open. We've tried to be open and honest. And we pray that Allah Ta'ala, Almighty God, accepts this from us. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. And peace and blessings of Almighty God upon our exemplary leader Muhammad and his family, his companions, all of them. Tayyip, I must go, my dear brother.
Yes, sir. All right, I love you. I won't touch Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, we love you too. We appreciate it. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. So that's our conversation with the great Imam Zaid Shakir. It's really important for us, and this has happened on this podcast, and I hope it happens a lot more, but to sit with our elders and to ask them to share with us how they view things. That question that I asked there at the end, you know, we want to make you proud. We feel so indebted to you. We're so grateful for you. We admire you so much. How do we do that? And he said, nobody's ever asked me that. You know, and I think it's a really important question to ask. And I'm not sure that Imam Zaid realized. Imam Zaid doesn't come to my shows. Imam Zaid is a very orthodox Muslim. You know, so he doesn't go to bars and concert halls where I have my shows. You know, some of my teachers will come and see my shows. Imam Zaid has not. And I'm not sure if Imam Zaid realizes that the majority of people that listen to my music and this podcast are not Muslim. So a lot of the conversation we had is what you would hear between Muslims of our generation, you know, converts of these our two generations. And what Imam Zaid is referencing at the end is something that's extremely important, which is the fact that, you know, the modern world basically threw away so much of what came before. And so you have modernism,
Modernity is just the time that we live in, and we're supposed to be at home in the time that we live. But modernism is this idea that the people living now are the best people that ever lived, and the people that came before didn't know what we know. They weren't as virtuous as us. They're not as just as us. We're evolved. We're better than them. And then we have postmodernism, which looked at the modernists and said, like, oh, you still made a big mess. And so now the postmodernists come to critique and try to correct and try to make progress upon what the modernists did. And they create frameworks around that to do that. What Imam Zaid and so many of our teachers remind us, not only in the Islamic tradition, but also in First Nations traditions, also in other spiritual and religious practices and systems, what they remind us is that there was a framework that existed before these modern times. And so oftentimes that perspective that could be of great benefit to the conversation, it's not going to fit into the binary that we have now, where, so he brought up the conversation around GLBT, and it's a really tricky one, and it's a highly charged one. And what Imam Zaid is saying is like, let's remember that we're from a tradition that the conversation, the two sides of this argument or this debate or this, if you want to call it a conversation, the two sides of these conversations, neither one of them are ours. We have a worldview that understands these things differently and has a different perspective on them. And so what he's saying is, let's proceed with caution and let's really try to be rooted in this pre-modern worldview that understands, that has a different epistemology, a different set of first truths that we're rooted in. And that perspective can be of benefit, could potentially be of benefit to the conversation, that there are other alternatives with which to understand these realities, all of these realities that we have, And so I've heard Imam Zaid say very similar things about Black Lives Matter, that very clearly white supremacy, racism is something that has to be addressed in this time and culture. And so he says, so we're not we're not on the left and we're not on the right. The people that have a pre-modern wisdom tradition, we have something that predates these, and a lot of those understandings were thrown out. And so I'm very grateful and appreciative, even though and he says, there are people that this will alienate because it's very difficult to understand something like that. This is this is the way that I read what he was saying, that there are people that it will be very difficult to understand that. It feels like, no, there are two sides of this argument. Either you're on my side or you're on the other side. And so what Imam Zaid is saying is like, we're not here to criticize anyone. We're not here to act like it's our business. We're not here to, definitely not to dehumanize anyone. We're not here to castigate anyone. We're not here to alienate anyone. We're definitely not here to mock anyone. We're not here to, to harm anybody. That's not what we're here for. Also, the way that the conversation around gender and sexuality is formulating now, we have a pre-modern wisdom tradition that has different first principles. And so it's going to have a different approach to this as well. And so I think that it's really important that with our elders, and he's not only talking about this specific issue. I've talked with Imam Zaid and I've been close to Imam Zaid when really horrible things happen in the Muslim community. We knew a leader that was hurting people, and he and I talked about, like, how do we deal with this? And Imam Zaid, said the same thing. We're going to err on the side of caution. We're not going to protect a person that's harming people, and we're not going to prop him up. You know what I mean? And we're not going to enable this, and we're not going to gaslight these people that this happened to. So we're not going to cover it up. We're also not going to publicly shame and cancel the person and spread this bad news. So it's like we have a different approach that we have to really proceed with caution, because it's easy, I think, to have knee-jerk reactions based on our own experiences. But one of the things that our elders do is give us the perspective of time. When Imam Zaid says, I think what he's saying is that conversations and norms in this particular society, because it's not connected necessarily to a belief system that predates modern conditions and modern circumstances, that, you know, the public opinion can sway drastically. And so do we want to be people that are in our tribe and in our group and you know, right in lockstep with what's happening in this moment? That's not what we want. You know what I mean? Because that's the way that, you know, so many people that have done horrible things, and so many people that have done things that they later regret. You know, I've been close to people that have been canceled, and I've seen the lies that have been told about them. You know, and I've seen the horrible things that have been spread about them. And I know people that have committed suicide because of this stuff, died of suicide. And I also know people that have spread bad information that feel regret. I see these people and I know that they regret jumping out the window because, like, well, we're all saying that this person is harmful. We're all saying, it seems like our community all seems to agree that this person is bad, or this institution is bad. And so it's all, you know, all gas, no brakes, all green light on their head right now, you know. And I've been with people that 2 years later really regret some of the things that they said, and they don't know what to do about it. So I think it's important for us, it's important for me to sit with our elders and to ask them to share their perspective with us, and to listen to them and to consider what they're saying, and to not treat them like their perspective isn't helpful to us, because I think that it absolutely is, you know. And especially when we sit with people like Imam Zaid, who also are listening to us and also want to know what we think about things, and also want to understand how we're perceiving things. You know, this is the beauty of what we're attempting to do here. We're co-travelers. Some of us have walked these streets before. Some of us, you know, I remember when this horrible thing in the Muslim community happened. I was close to a situation. I called Imam Zaid and I said, at the end of the conversation, I said, Imam Zaid, I'm really sorry to have to give you this bad news. And he just smiled and, you know, he said, Brother Ali, this is not my first rodeo. Like, man, I've been through this before. And we forget a lot of times they've been through stuff that we can't imagine. You know what I'm saying? So I'm very grateful to Imam Zaid, and I love him, and I'm not apologizing for him at all. And I'm not trying to, you know, what I am trying to do though is provide a context that I think that a lot of us miss. I'm a person that loves elders, and I love to listen to them. And I might not say what they say, and I might not say it how they say it, but that's why I'm listening to them, because I want their perspective, I want their opinion, I want their wisdom. They can see us in a way that we can't see ourselves. They see our time in the way that we can't see it. You know, the fish that jumps out of the water lands back in the water and tries to tell the other fish, we're in the water. And the fish are like, what's water? Because they don't have that perspective. You know what I mean? They have no idea. They've been in the water their whole lives. They don't know what water is. You know what I'm saying? So this is the purpose of this podcast, and I'm very, very grateful to Imam Zaid. Special shout out to all of you. Thank you so much for rocking with us and being on this journey with us. I want to give a special shout out to Amna Mirza, to Mansoor Panawala, to Last Word. Special shout out to Mark from Medina Hip Hop that created the logo. Special thanks to Ant, who did the Traveler song and allowed us to use the theme, the beat as the theme music. Special shout out to everybody that's participated and helped in this endeavor. Special shout out to Amir Rahman. Special shout out to Darian Washington. The producer of this podcast is my dear friend, my brother, Brendan Kelly, aka BK1, and it is a production, production of Travelers Media. Thank you so much for being here with us. We love you. We appreciate you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.